Hello, my name is Joy Jenkins, and I am a high school counselor at Tascosa High School in Amarillo, Texas. I chose to complete my participating video by interviewing school personnel in regards to their technology usage in managing their departments. I interviewed Christy Weatherly, our cafeteria and food service manager, Blake Barton, our building maintenance contact, Drew Daniel, our human services contact, Tiffany Fisk, our PEMS expert on campus, Rebecca Jones, our transportation and student transfer expert, and Jennifer White, our school nurse. I also chose to include information before my reflection in regards to technology use in managing the ESL and testing departments, as I am the expert on our campus for those. I chose to ask the following questions. How do you use technology to manage your department? How does technology enhance management in your department? What areas of improvement are needed technology-wise to help your department? And what are the strengths of the technological tools you are able to use? I set up each interview by email, and I let each of them know what questions I would ask ahead of time and what area of their expertise they would be covering.
Okay, the first question I have is, how do you use technology to manage your department?
Okay, we use technology, like we have different programs we use on our computer. We use Primero, and that's what we use to go in, and it actually kind of keeps track of like our menus and how we bring things up and how inventory stuff is delivered in. And then we use Microsoft Word, just, different areas that we need. Excel, make spreadsheets and do other things with that. We use the internet if we have to go on and, check absences or just any kind of detail for recipes or stuff like that. And then telephone, talking on the telephone every day, people calling in.
Yes.
Even calling out, trying to speak with people. So basically.
One of my favorite programs that y'all use is because I have a student over at Paramount Terrace is that I can get online and pay. I don't have to. I know in the past, maybe way back, but in the past, parents would have to actually make a trip up to the school to put money on the account. But I really like that I can do all of that from wherever I am. And then it's also set up to where it will send me emails. Like I can say, when it gets down below $5, send me an email. And it will send me an email so I know, I need to get on the pay. So I don't know what that program is called, but I really like that one.
I knew that we had it, but I didn't know what that intense. I mean, I didn't
Yes.
actually keep track of that one.
Yes, yes. And with is it Primero?
Primero.
So as students come through the lines, or as you use things and as they buy things, how does that keep track of your inventory?
Well, it also depends on how you actually bring it up. Of course, the actual meal itself kind of is an actual item thing, but like when you get to the drinks and the chips and the snacks and all that, it really details it out. It tells us exactly how many. Or like when we bring up an item, it lets you know if you do a meal or an a la carte. An a la carte is like someone that just comes in and buys a piece of pizza or 2 tacos, or just an actual kind of like an entree. So it keeps track of the meals and a la cartes and how many drinks you sell and just details it.
Does it make a difference if a kid is on free or reduced lunch? Like, do they still ring up the same?
It brings up the same, but it does make a difference. Like say someone who's full pay that come in, they can get like just an entree. But if somebody comes in that's free or reduced lunch, they have to get an actual. They sell them components, and they have to have the bread, the meat, the protein, and then actually a fruit or a vegetable. So it does break it down, and you have to pay attention to that.
How does technology enhance management in your department?
Well, for actually, I guess, everyday paperwork, it just helps me keep track of the paperwork, keep track of the inventory for ordering. It helps me to be able to order. And then maybe people, like say if my employees are calling me or something, it keeps track of like sick days and all kinds of stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine how the this was all done without technology, to be honest. You would have to have impeccable paperwork skills. What areas of improvement are needed technology-wise to help your department?
Well, whenever the actual inventory part of it takes place, I think that it doesn't calculate as well as it should. I guess maybe they need to critique the program a little better, but say you put certain items in and maybe it doesn't take out the amount of items that you put in to take out, or even transferring from school to school. Sometimes it doesn't do a transfer correctly, or it'll say you have something and you don't, or you do, and vice versa. So just kind of keeping track of the inventory better. I think they need a little bit better technology that way to enhance the program better.
Okay. And then what strengths of the technological tools are you able to use?
We have a steamer oven that's at the computer, and that just helps things cook faster, better. It doesn't cook the same way as the oven. You don't have to cover things. You don't have to add water. There's a lot of different things that thing does. And then we have like a turbo oven, and it cooks really fast. And so something that may take 20 minutes or so in the oven, will probably cook for 2 or 3 minutes in the turbo oven.
And when would you use those versus the regular oven?
The pizza, like to say for pizzas, if you're toasting things, a lot of things that are going to be crispy and hard, but still get hot in the center. So yeah, so our menus and things are on the computer, and that technology helps with that. Helps us to from day to day, helps us communicate, or helps us. We have 4-week menus, weeks 1 through 4, and then we actually have 20. There's like a day in each week, so we have like menu 1 has menu days 1 through 5, and then menu 2 has days 5 through 10. So it just if we know we're on week 2, day 5, we can go back and look. It just kind of helps keep track of our menus and how much.
Yeah, I know the menus my daughter brings home. It's always, because we talk about it the night before, what she's going to choose for lunch the next day. It seems to be, there's a lot, and it's great for student choice, but I can't imagine, because y'all are preparing essentially 3 or 4 meals per kid to make sure that everybody has a choice when they come through.
And everybody has the same choice, like the first person has the same 5 choices that the last person does too, so yeah.
Yes. Okay, anything you want to add about technology?
We use it a lot, and my job will probably be really hard without it. So.
Okay, this one's for the maintenance department.
Okay.
How do you use technology to manage your department?
Several different ways with the maintenance of the school and to making sure that things stay safe. Teachers can communicate with me any issues that they see with the building via email, which is a quick way for us to find out if there's anything wrong with the building. And then in addition to that, whenever I find out that there's something wrong with the building, I fill out an electronic work order. So we have a program that we use called Maintenance Connection that allows us to fill out a work order asking for something to be fixed. And it is kind of specific on the location within the building and what exactly is wrong with it. And that instantly goes to our central maintenance department so they can respond, they can prioritize it and respond as quickly as they need to.
So do teachers email you first, or do they put in the order?
They email me. The work orders come to me. Everything comes through me that could be wrong with the building. That way, if there are any questions from maintenance, I'm the person who knows about what's going on, and they can come to me.
Okay. How does technology enhance management in your department?
Primarily efficiency. With the electronic work orders, it sends it to the ESC, or the maintenance building at the ESC, and they are able to send it to the maintenance person who is responsible for that, whether it's a plumbing issue, whether it's a facilities issue with something like we had a rail on a staircase broken. That's a safety issue. They can make sure that it gets to the right person. So it increases efficiency, because if it was me having to figure out who to contact at maintenance to come take care of an issue, it could prolong the issue because there's so many people, so many different things that can go wrong with a building. It's hard to narrow down exactly who to call with something. So I fill out the work order. It goes to the person that understands everything at maintenance. They assign somebody and they get right over here if it's an emergency.
How quick is the turnaround? I mean, like if it's like a plumbing issue, that's pretty major.
Yeah, so let's say that we have a science sink that is leaking and flooding the room down below it, which has happened this year. I turn in the electronic work order. I put emergency, we have a flood. You know, of course, custodians have already been called to try to help start, managing the flood. And we had somebody here within 30 minutes from maintenance that was able to come in and find the leak. It wasn't something as easy as just turning off water. It was leaking in between the level 1, level 2, the floors.
The floors.
It was leaking in between the floors. So it was something that we had to get somebody out here to get in the ceiling in between and get the leak taken care of. And it was very quick. And I don't know that it would have been that quick had we not have something that's so fast and efficient to help us communicate.
What areas of improvement are needed, technology-wise, to help the maintenance department?
Sometimes it's hard to be as specific as they want in an electronic work order. So something that opens up a more clear line of communication between the person that's actually coming to do the work order. Because once somebody gets assigned to it, I don't know who that is. Mm-hmm. And so unless they can come find me on campus, something that clarifies who is actually coming, so that I know and that they know, they already know to come to me, but where I'm at and who I am isn't really clear on the document. So it can be sometimes that's a bump in the road, but other than that, we're pretty efficient with maintenance.
Do you think it's gotten better? I know when I first started teaching, like they were still fulfilling work orders from years in the past. Has that kind of fixed itself, or is that still something they're trying to hammer out?
It has gotten better. It depends on the type of work order and the priority of the work order. Let's say that we have something that needs to be done in a classroom, like
painting, maybe?
Painting or hanging up a new whiteboard or a new smart board, something that's going to disturb the classroom. They intentionally deprioritize those and try to fulfill them when we're not in school, and they don't work on the weekends. So like they'll be doing a lot of stuff like that during spring break. They'll be hanging whiteboards, installing smart boards, mounting projectors in the ceiling. Those are the types of things that they intentionally postpone until we're not in school. So, some teachers, and that line of communication is not real clear. Hey, we have this scheduled for this date, something that's not an emergency work order, They don't communicate that with me. So let's say a teacher has a smart board that needs to be hung. That teacher thinks that they're just being forgotten, when in reality, they're waiting until spring break whenever maintenance is working, but all the kids are gone. But I don't have that information, and that's when it's scheduled to be done. So that's kind of a break in communication. But other than that, when it comes to stuff that is actually wrong, it's quick. It's a lot quicker than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. What are the strengths of the technological tools that you're able to use?
Efficiency. Kind of what I already talked about before. Just how quick I'm able to communicate with them get it assigned to somebody and get somebody over here. Without technology, if it was just word by mouth, I had to call somebody and say, hey, this is wrong, and then they had to figure out. It would take a lot longer. But with all the maintenance people having iPads, that's something I haven't talked about. Whenever I turn in a work order, it goes to that person at the maintenance department. All the maintenance workers have iPads, and so they get a notification that something needs to be done. So that's how they know to get here. Like if let's say that we have part of our plumbing department that are working on a new addition at San Houston Middle School. And we have an emergency leak here. Well, they get a notification. They need to leave that and come here because we have an emergency. And that's all done through an iPad notification. So, efficiency is the main thing within maintenance that technology has helped.
Do all schools go through one person now? Because I know it used to be where if you had something, you had to turn in the work order. And I could see how that would become convoluted and confusing.
Yes.
And people prioritize their stuff over everybody else's. So now do all schools go through a main person who then...
Maintenance has requested, I don't think that it's actually been demanded yet, but that will there be one contact person for maintenance on every campus. That way we kind of get to know each other, like the lady that does all the assigning at the ESC is Kim McDonald, and she knows me, I know her, so she knows who to refer any maintenance guy to here on campus. She knows that I'm the contact person. And I know that if for some reason, let's say we have an emergency and nobody has showed up, I know to call her directly. So having one person is really, really important.
Okay. Anything else technology-wise that you can think of?
I don't think so. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
This one is in regards to human resources. How do you use technology to manage your department?
The district and us use Talent Ed. When we have an opening available, we will go into an online software called Talent Ed, and it allows us to look up everything. Everybody who's applied for the positions, it gives us their background, it gives them their application, it gives them their scholar credit, it gives us a certification, so we all have it in one place.
Okay. And then the people who apply can, they create accounts, and then they can get in and check the status
Correct.
of everything.
Correct. They can look at where their application process is going through, where it's at, and so it allows them to kind of keep up with it, but it also allows us to know who's out there at any given time, or also to instruct them to do what they need to do if we want them to be, and it allows us to follow their process if we're waiting on them to finish the application process.
Okay. How does technology enhance management in your department?
Kind of like we talked about a minute ago. You type in your search parameters, so you're not having to go through everybody's applied. You type in the search parameters, and it will pull those up. So if I need a composite math, then I type in composite math, and it gives me all the people who applied with our district in that field. It also allows me to know who on our campus is looking for other jobs, so what we can prepare that way.
Are you able to look and see exactly what they're certified in? They load all that in?
Yes, we have the SBEC website that we can go to as well, but through that it also allows us to look at the different certifications that they have. So an example is I've got one math teacher who's not only certified in math but also special ed. That's a plus because we've got to have special ed math teachers to do that. So they automatically jump up to the top of my interview list.
Okay. What areas of improvement are needed technology-wise?
There's one thing that I had that really kind of drives me crazy about the Talent Ed part is the references part. Not as much as it's good and bad. For people who are applying and looking for the jobs, but they're really just kind of feeling, it sends out to everybody who's a reference to them. So, for example, say I wanted to look for another job, but I was just fishing. There wasn't anything serious.
Right.
I have to fill out the application process. I have to put the references I want, and all of a sudden, my boss has got a reference form that he has to fill out. I haven't really been able to tell him that it's not a big deal. I'm just kind of looking around. And I may not want to know that to begin with. So that part of it is negative in the fact that, you know what, you can't really search for things without somebody else knowing.
Right.
But on the flip side, people who are in my department, they start looking, it lets me know who's looking because I get a reference form on them. So you play the good versus the bad. But I think if they can fix that in some way to where, you know what, you can be curious, I think that would overall improve what we need to do.
Or at least give a window.
Right.
Because I know when I did summer school last year, I didn't even get a chance to ask
No.
Dr. Floyd. Because it's supposed to be courtesy-wise, you ask.
And
But,
all of a sudden, somebody's like, hey, I got an email for a reference for you. I'm like, I didn't know that went out.
yeah. And then what are the strengths of the technological tools?
You know, we've had talent ad for a couple of years, and before we had to fill out these data sheets, and then you had to hand deliver them to the ESC, and you had to do one for every position. What this has done is allow us, one, to do it here and not have to go up to the ESC to do it. We can do it from our offices, for our classrooms, but it's also allowed us not to have to go through all those papers to see who's applied for what and where they're at. We have it all at the touch of our finger by typing in search parameters. So it's made the interview process and the hiring process much more efficient.
Okay. And then anything else? Technology?
In regards to HR, no, like I said, this is a relatively new system that we've only had for about 1.5 years, almost 2. So we're all still kind of learning the ins and outs on how that works and what we can actually do with it. I bet this time next year, if you were to interview me, I would find out many more tools that I didn't know about previously. So we're just kind of experimenting with it right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
How do you use technology to manage your department?
We use Outlook for email and messages to one another. We use our calendar to schedule appointments. We use our phones are set up through ShoreTel, so we get voicemails that way, and we can look up contacts to call people. I'm trying to think what else.
Then Skyward is where a lot of our PIMS
Yes,
is located.
right.
And then tell me about some of the reports that Stan runs.
For PIMS.
Yeah.
I just checked one recently for our master schedule to make sure that we have all of our coding right, like classes being a semester or year long, the population served, whether it's ESL kids or special ed kids, gifted kids. What else did we check in there? Teacher record, number of vocational minutes spent in each class. We use PIMS course numbers to make sure that they match up with other courses in the state. So we have to check those, make sure we're using good numbers for that. That was the bulk of my side. I know there's more PIMS that comes in for our secretary checks one that has to do with staffing, but the part I did was mostly scheduling.
Okay. How does technology enhance management with PIMS?
With PIMS, we use Excel a lot to run those reports to check, so I think it'd be a lot harder to check without Excel because we can go through line by line and check things that way or run reports for errors and that sort of thing. So I don't know what I'd do without the Excel.
Okay. What are some areas of improvement that are needed technology-wise for PIMS?
Just within PIMS,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we have to be really careful when we create new courses and make sure that we enter the right things, and some of those are just kind of hard to get to. So I think just within Skyward, the program that we use, that you have to click through several screens to get there. So it's some of it's kind of hidden, kind of embedded into. So I just have to be really careful when I create courses and things like that. So, and when other people create courses, you know, we have to be sure that we're all doing it the same way. So we did have a principal make us a little cheat sheet to try to help, but sometimes mistakes still slip by.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we do so much double checking.
And then what are the strengths of the technological tools that you are able to use?
Just with the PIMS, I don't know. I mean, it's nice that it's managed all in one place. I mean, that we go into the master schedule and put it all in one place. The reports that we run sure make it easier to check. I can't imagine going through it line by line and course by course without that report that we run in Excel. So I would guess that would be a strength.
Are those the same reports that Stan runs? Like he runs them like at 2 o'clock in the morning every morning? Are those the same type of?
No, he runs them, I think, just once a year. And so we check and we go back and make sure that our courses are good before the state looks at them, I think is how that works. So
Okay.
we just do it once a year.
Is that part of the October snapshot, like one of the things that we have to get checked and fixed before the
Right.
snapshot date?
Right, to make sure it all looks good for that.
Okay. Anything else with technology and PENS?
I don't think so.
Okay, for transportation, how do you use technology to manage your department?
We actually do not manage transportation very much within our district because we contract it out to a third party. So the main thing that we do in order to facilitate transportation with our district is communicate effectively with our bus company. So that can be done through email and through Shortel, our communication system. We mostly just need to notify them whenever we are going to be reserving information or reserving buses. There is an online PO system that we can request buses for field trips, bus routes, things that require extra money. They have a system that helps us determine whether or not students are eligible for bus services based on our district policy, which is students can only ride the school bus to school if they live outside of a 2-mile radius from the actual campus. So they have a software that you put in the address and it tells you where, number one, if they qualify for bus services, and then number two, what route they would be on and the closest pickup drop-off spot for them. So they do use that service. And then of course, if kids get special education services, they can get bus services through that and not be within that 2-mile radius. But those are the main ways that we use technology in the bus department.
Okay. And then of course, how does it help? How does technology enhance management?
I think the best thing that technology does for us as far as transportation is, because it is a third party, it just provides documentation of all of our interactions. And we can go back and reference what we really asked for, if we did make those reservations, if we've already paid for the services that they're providing. And so, for the most part, on our end, it just helps us keep data and documentation that's easily accessible so that we can verify our interactions with them.
Okay. And what areas of improvement are needed technology-wise?
I think that as a campus, we're more technology savvy than the bus barn is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, all of the communication they want to be done over the telephone. So I think if their workers were more, and if the people that worked in the bus barn were more apt to respond to emails, I think that would be a lot easier for us because, I'm kind of the school liaison for the bus barn and I'm never in my office. And so it's hard for me to take time when I want to be out on campus doing something and I could be sending an email to come back and sit down and have a conversation on the phone and make sure the person that I want is sitting at her desk.
Right.
So I think if they were more email friendly,
Oriented.
then we would have a better time communicating.
Okay. And then what are the strengths of the technological tools?
I think one of their strengths is their programs that they use in order to determine if kids are in the bus service or not, and their routing services, because it can tell, we can provide parents who have questions a detailed list of the bus picks up at 3:45 and it makes 17 stops before it gets to your house. And these are all of the places that it stops. So I think that's nice that it's a very detail-oriented document that we can use to troubleshoot whenever parents have problems. And the other thing that's nice is that software they use to make sure students live in the busing area. Because a lot of people will just go and put their name in Google Maps or their address and they'll say, well, it takes me 2.5 miles to drive here. But that's not a 2-mile radius.
Right.
It's the driving distance. And so what is nice is they have a software, it calculates it for you, there's no human error, and if it says that you don't live within the 2-mile radius, then there's no arguing with
And
that.
it's black and white.
It's very black and white, and it's very nice that we don't have to rely on, well, I calculated it like this, and so I got 2.5 miles while the parent got, or I got 1 mile while the parent got 1.9.
Right.
So it's just very black and white, and it prevents a lot of those arguments.
Okay. And then I also wanted to ask you about technology in regards to our the way we manage transfers, because we have a lot of transfers that come into the school from other schools, and I know that we're currently working on new and improved ways to manage those. So how do you use technology to manage our transfers?
Our transfer students. Well, in the past, we've just done spreadsheets, which has been kind of limited. But now we have access in Skyward, which is our student management system, where we can go in and document students who are transfers, and we can put what their home campus would be, why they're coming to our school, their reason for a transfer, if they're approved, if they're conditional. Like sometimes we say you can transfer into our campus, but we are going to require that you participate in our ROTC program. And so it's a really great way that that's linked to the student profile instead of this third-party random document that you have to cross-reference. So counselors can pull that up when they're doing scheduling and see, okay, I need to make sure that this student is enrolled in ROTC the whole time they're here. And then, throughout the school year, if a kid comes in and wants to do a drop form for ROTC, the counselor has that flag under their profile that says, this is an issue. If they drop it, we need to talk with the principal on whether or not they're going to be allowed to stay on our campus.
Right.
So I think that's the best way that we've been managing the transfers. We've talked a lot this year about as far as getting proper documentation on our transfers before the beginning of the year, because we have access now to put it in Skyward. Those middle school campuses can see for their 8th graders that are being promoted, they can see whenever a student has applied and been accepted to a school that's not in their district. And those counseling clerks can pull their cumulative folders and set them aside, and they can make sure that those folders go to the transferred campus rather than their original home campus, which is something that without a lot of human interaction. I mean, I don't have to make a list and call all of the counseling clerks. It's a super simple report that can be run in Skyward, and those counselor clerks can make it easy so that at the beginning of the year when our transfers show up, we already have their entire cumulative folder. We know what they requested in Bridges. We know what to put them in. And we're not making a schedule from scratch with no history on the student.
Right.
And then with the knowledge that we're just making it in order to have a piece of paper to give them. They're going to come in and we're going to redo their whole schedule in 3 days. So I think that Skyward profile is really going to help us with the way that we manage our transfers.
Okay. Well, and I think you just answered how it enhances management. What areas of improvement do you think are already needed? I know it's fairly a new thing that we're trying, but
yeah, it is new. I think what is hard is within Skyward, you can grant access to different parts of the program to different people. And right now, it's kind of like we're blindly trying to decide who needs to have access to that, who should have the capability of entering it, who's going to manage it. And so I think moving forward, when we have a better idea of all of the different ways that we can utilize that feature, we'll have a better idea of who needs access to that, who can see it, and more ideas on how we can utilize it.
Knoxville, have a nice night.
I think that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Okay. How do you use technology to manage the nursing department?
Okay, one of the ways that we manage the nursing department is through our main program, Skyward, and that is can be utilized by the nurses to figure out and to document what health conditions each of our children has. Also to document if that child is on medication. And then one of the biggest things we do in Skyward is keep track of the child's immunizations and constantly update the immunization status of kids as they get shots, especially our ESL kids as they're coming into the country. And then I can run a report to see who's delinquent on their shots, or to see who, like this time of year, I can run a report and it'll tell me who needs a shot throughout the summer. So then next, when we start back to school, I will have notified all those kids, and hopefully during the summer they can get their shots, turn those into me. It keeps me organized. Skyward keeps me organized and keeps me current on my health conditions, my vaccinations, and then also something that I utilize it for every single day is to look at attendance for kids. For my kiddos who are maybe out with a chronic health condition, or kids who I'm just checking on, you can look and see their attendance and see if they're here, if they're absent, and if their absence is excused or not excused.
Okay. Okay. And then you also, you use it to notify teachers of.
Absolutely. I mean, email every day, a
Right.
huge part of the technology that we use, just to let parents or teachers here at school know about the health conditions of kids. Maybe I have a diabetic child who's having a hard day, and they might need to come to the nurse's office more frequently that day to check their blood sugar. I can go and see what classes that child is in throughout the day, and email all of those teachers to let them know what's going on. Maybe he needs to come to the nurse more frequently that day. So I use that constantly. I just did that earlier today with a teacher who emailed me about a child's vision, because he thought he perhaps needed glasses, and so I called the child down, tested his vision. He does need glasses, and so called parent, and then can notify that teacher, of what we did to follow up on getting him glasses.
Now, how do you use, I only know this because my daughters are still getting their vaccination. Now they're recording all of that online. So how does that make a play into the school system?
Yeah, there's a computer program called MTrack, and most doctors' offices in Texas and clinics will use MTrack to track a child's immunizations from the time they're first born. They can go in and document the shots the child has received, and there's an immunization schedule there, and it will also tell you when the child's due for their next vaccinations. And I do have access to that. It's a little bit different in high school in that at age 18, kids are kicked off of MTrack. And so a lot of our kids who are 18 and over, you can't access their records anymore. And so again, that a lot of times applies to our ESL and refugee kiddos who come over later, but maybe they're still classified as freshmen, but they're 18 or 19.
Right.
So it is a little bit hard there. But it's really helped me. It's cut down definitely on how much time I have to spend getting in touch with parents to get original copies of shot records when I can go on MTrack and find their whole record from birth.
Okay.
I love that. Yeah.
Okay. How does technology enhance management in your department?
Again, I think it just helps me be more organized, more accurate. We have at our school we have over 2,000 kids, and so if I didn't have Skyward and email and reports, there's no way I could keep track of who needed what shot, or who was going where, or what teacher to notify because of this child. There's no way. So just to keep organized and accurate records, I couldn't do it without technology.
Right. What areas of improvement are needed technology-wise?
What I would really like to see would be for the kids to come in. We've got this kind of in the planning stages, but where the kids could come in, sign in on a laptop or on a computer, and we can take care of whatever their needs are, and then document that. We're getting there, but it's just such a process right now, and there's still some bugs in our system about timing and how it would work if I have more than one child in here at a time, which I almost always do. So that's still a little bit hard. So at this point, we're still manually having kids write down when they come into the nurse's office their name and their time and their chief complaint. And then I'll go and document on the paper, and then a lot of times then I document in the computer too. So I'm doing some double work, but it's, again, I'm trying to be accurate.
Right.
And so I do it twice. I would love to be able to move more to that. I think we would probably be more efficient, but we're just not there quite yet.
Right. And so what are the strengths of the technological tools you're able to use?
I think the reports that we run, they're accurate for immunizations anyway. They're accurate reports. Also for our kids that have health conditions, maybe I can run a report of every child who's documented as having ADHD, or every child who has diabetes, or every child who has sickle cell anemia. I can go through and pick out those kids, and it's accurate, and I can, count on that and let teachers know that, or sponsors, or a lot of times that does come into play when we have kids at the high school level going every which way for activities. And so maybe we have a child who's allergic to something and they have an EpiPen here at school. And so if I know, okay, band is going this day out of town, then I can make sure that any of my kids with EpiPens, I've talked to the band director before they leave, because I can rely on my report to tell me, okay, these are the kids who have severe allergies. So I think that's the strength of it, is the accuracy of the reports.
Anything else? Technology?
I mean, I do use, just for assessment, I have a digital thermometer, I have a digital pulse oximeter, I have a digital blood pressure cuff, all those things. Technology-wise, I have a automated defibrillator. So those all come into play too. But there's nothing quite like just knowing my kids and looking at them and knowing them, and sometimes that's hard to do with so many kids, but I think that's one of the best parts about school nursing, is I get to see the same kids most every day, or the same population. It's
Right.
not like in a hospital where you have a different set of patients every day.
Right.
So at least I have that continuity.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yes, you're welcome.
In regards to the ESL department, we use Skyward, a program called TAMS, and Microsoft Excel to manage our department. Skyward helps me to keep up with all of our kids' records, make sure they're up to date, and make sure they're coded correctly for PEMS so that they're tracked accordingly. With Skyward, I'm able to see how long the students have been here, what language they speak, what LEP category they fall in, and what kind of schedule they need to have for the school year. I have found with ESL it's extremely important to make sure that their classes are leveled appropriately. I don't want to put a kid in a class that's too structured linguistically, because they will be bored, but then on the other end of things, I don't want to put a kid in a class that does not have linguistic structure and they need it desperately, and so that everything is over their head and they don't know what to do. TAMS helps me to keep their TELPAS information in line, as well as all of their testing information. I'm able to look up their test scores and see how they're doing and what tests they still need. TAMS is also where I code my students as refugees and unschooled refugees in order to determine what sort of accountability category they will fall into for testing. I use Microsoft Excel a lot. I use this to manage all the different pieces of information that I need to know at any given time on my students. I have one spreadsheet that I worked really hard on at the beginning of the year that contains all of the students' names, grade levels, cohorts, their TELPAS, their most recent TELPAS results are on there. I have their languages, their countries of origin. Their LEP status is also on there, and their EOC status, like what tests they've taken, what tests they've received a special provisions exemption for, what tests they still need, and what tests they have failed thus far. And recently, I have also added what accommodations they will be receiving for this year's EOC testing. I have U.S. enrollment dates on there. I have their years in the U.S., refugee status, and their unschooled or their SIFE status. I have found that periodically throughout the year, I need every single piece of those information at some point or another. And it's extremely helpful to have it all in one place, because currently I'm dealing with about 120 ESL kids, which is nowhere near what some of the other campuses, even in our district, are, but it is very hard to manage whenever all of those pieces of information are in different places in different folders. Technology enhances management in the ESL department simply because there's so much paperwork to keep up with. As I was saying, each of these students has an LPAC folder, they have a QM folder, they have, currently right now we have their writing sample folder. I mean, I could have at any given time for an ESL kid 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 folders with information on them. It's nice to be able to have a couple programs and a spreadsheet to keep most of this information when I need it. As for improvements, I would like to see Skyward have the capabilities to generate an Excel spreadsheet like I have set up. It took an incredible amount of time to get that set up, and it sure would be nice if Skyward was able to do that, because I have found that a lot of times I'm having to enter the information into Skyward, and then I'm also having to enter the same information into Excel, so I'm doing double work. And while it's way better than having to go constantly searching folders, it would be nice and more efficient if it were all in one place and I was only having to enter it once. And of course, there's a lot of human error that you have to think about. A lot of times things can get misentered, or when I get kids from middle schools and things are misentered, and I have to go back and figure out what the correct information is and get that entered as well. The strengths of the technology tools that I have available are that I'm able to access things quickly. And then, as I said earlier, I'm not having to go hunt down folders and paperwork, and I don't have to keep a paper file on every single kid. Without my spreadsheet and Skyward, I would probably still be hand entering all of the LPAC decision making forms that we had to do for EOC testing. It takes an incredible amount of time to do those, and I don't know how I would have done it without all of the information already in one spot. The technology I have available to me is a great way for me to keep track of my kids. Like I said, we are definitely not the biggest ESL campus even in town, but managing 120 kiddos with special information is hard for anyone to do without technology, and I can't imagine doing that without technology. As far as the testing department goes, we have several different programs that we use that are generally very beneficial. We use Skyward, of course. We use our TAMS program through Pearson. We have a fairly new program called Test Hound, and then we use Microsoft Excel. Skyward helps us to determine what cohort the kids are in, as well as where they are enrolling from, both of which, those two pieces of information play a huge part in what sort of testing those students receive. Testing can be pretty tricky. There's exemptions to consider. For any current senior, for example, who took algebra in middle school, there was no passing standard that year, and so those kids don't have a score, but they're considered almost exempt. I mean, they just had to take it, and so it's important for us to know what cohort the kids are in so that we don't get any of that information mixed up. There are exemptions to be considered for all of our out-of-state or private school students, because if they finish a STAR-tested course in another state or in an accredited private school, then they are also exempt. So knowing the correct cohort as well as knowing where they are coming from is vital to the process. Skyward also helps us to determine which of our ESL students are special provision students who only need to take and not pass the English 1 EOC. Those students have to meet certain requirements. Then we're able to find the information in regards to those requirements in Skyward. Skyward will also allow us to see what courses students are currently enrolled in, so we can determine what tests they are eligible to take at the end of the school year. We use TAMS to look up test scores on all of our students. TAMS comes in handy when we get students in from out of district, because we are able to go look them up by PEMS number in TAMS. We can pull them over to our school, and we can see very quickly what tests they've taken, what tests they've passed, what tests they've failed, and what tests they need, which is incredibly more efficient than waiting on a phone call from another school. That also comes in handy when they come in like the week before testing, which happens everywhere. So it is nice to have that capability in TAMS. TAMS is also where we go to get our testing results every year. And that is helpful. That has really cut down on a lot of paper. It used to be that we had to wait on an email from our district testing coordinator that went to our principals, that then came to us, and now we have access to all of that in TAMS. Test Hound is a fairly new program that we started using last year to manage our test administrations. Test Hound, it allows us to scan in all of our materials that we receive, which makes the inventory process much easier and more efficient. We're able to place students in rooms through Test Hound and generate rosters and accommodation forms as well. Almost every thing we need to know about test administrations can be found in Test Hound. Like I said, we get rosters, we get accommodations forms, we're able to print seating charts for the teachers to fill out, start and stop times. It's a great program. Finally, we use Excel. 2 years ago, we began using Excel to generate a comprehensive list by cohort for all of our students and what tests they have passed, failed, or still need to take. When we first opened up the testing coordinator position, and this is outside of any other position that we have here. In the past, it used to be a counselor that would do it, and now our district has made test coordinator positions. So when we first opened that up, that first person found it particularly difficult to get all of the information that she needed in a clear and concise manner, especially when she was dealing with 6 different counselors who would send her information in 6 different ways. And because our campus has well over 2,000 students, it was just incredibly hard to manage and to get everything right. So I sat down that summer and I generated 4 lists with students in the correct cohort and what tests they had already passed, failed, were exempt from, and still needed. The list has developed over time. It's a living document. It's never done because we're always getting kids, losing kids, so it's always changing. Now it contains which students ended up passing English 1 and English 2 through the averaging rule that the state passed. It has accommodations on there. It has ESL indicators as far as which students need STAR L tests, which students met special provisions. It has ALT test indicators for our ACC students, and it also has which students need to take the STAR A tests. Cohorts, as I talked about a little bit earlier, are extremely important when it comes to testing. Last year, we still had an entire cohort of kids who were on a different test than the rest of the campus because they were tax kids. We had to be very careful in making sure that even though a student may be repeating a grade level, for example, they were repeating 11th grade last year, but were supposed to be a senior, we still had them in the correct cohort. Or the cohort is the year that they were supposed to graduate in, because they might be a tax kid, and we didn't want tax kids taking STAR tests. This year, as mentioned before, we have a group of senior students who took algebra in middle school the first year that the STAR EOC came out. Therefore, there was no passing standard. So those kids took a STAR test, but they don't have a score. And so we have to be very careful that we're not retesting those kids because they were kind of grandfathered in to the process. Without our Excel lists of correctly cohorted students, I'm not sure how we would be getting by. The technology we have available to us right now enhances management for testing because we have over 2,000 students on our campus. Each of these students has different needs. We're actually still carrying a tax kid because he was kind of in a special circumstance. And without Skyward and TAMS and TestHound and our wonderful Excel spreadsheets, I'm not sure how we would manage. As far as improvement goes, I would like to see Skyward having the capabilities to generate the Excel spreadsheets. As I said earlier, those are living documents. We could probably hire a full-time person to just manage those lists because they can get very overwhelming at times, specifically at the beginning and at the end of a school year when we're getting in a lot of kids and a lot of our kids are going other places and we're having to manage who's repeating but what cohort they need to be in and things like that. And while these are gold, as far as we're concerned, they take a lot of time to manage. Right now, we find Skyward to be extremely unreliable when it comes to actual test scores. So it would be nice if Skyward had the capabilities to generate some of those Excel spreadsheets that we work so hard to keep up with. Finally, the strengths of the technology tools when it comes to testing for us is simply the organization that it provides us with. Without our technology, things would definitely get lost in the shuffle. There'd be no way that we could keep up with it. It would be incredibly hard to keep up with all of the different needs of all of our different students. Testing already comes with a lot of paperwork that we have to keep up with as far as documentation and things we have to keep on file. I can't imagine having to keep up with what students needed, what test on paper, and what is special about all of those tests and all of that. We would have to have a paper file on every single kid. So without technology, I'm not sure how we would manage our testing department. This activity was an interview of several school leaders in regards to the way they use technology to manage their departments. I was able to interview our cafeteria and food service manager, our building maintenance contact, our human services contact, our PEMS expert, our transportation expert, and our nurse as required. I also included a short interview on student transfers, as that is a fairly new problem that we are experiencing as a campus, and I knew that we were using technology to manage it. I also sat down to really reflect on these questions as the ESL and testing coordinator on our campus. I conducted all of these interviews on our campus over a time span of 3 weeks. As I was interviewing these leaders, I found myself to be intrigued. While I'm not a fan of being on camera, and I was a bit self-conscious to be honest, I was able to learn quite a bit about each department. Overall, I was pleased with the new knowledge I was able to walk away with. I felt that these interviews went very well. I cannot think of anything bad about my experience other than my overwhelming camera shyness. It was difficult to set up times with these individuals as it is spring, and this time of year at a high school is incredibly busy. And we have sporting events, senior issues, testing every time we turn around, pre-registration, and summer-itis for most of our students. The good that arose from this activity, again, lies in the knowledge that I was able to receive. In my analysis of this activity, I would say it was hard to ask enough questions to generate the time needed for the actual video. I know that some of my questions were repetitive. Also, in the transportation interview, it was hard for my interviewee to come up with good and long answers because our district contracts those services out to a third party. And so almost every response that she was able to give me was that our district contracts that service out. That's why I decided to add a few other components to the list of interviews I was supposed to conduct. Also, I found it difficult to call on my own expertise and call it an interview. There is a lot we do with technology in the ESL and testing areas, and so I didn't want to leave those out because technology makes all of the difference in those two components. But I'm the coordinator of both of these, and I couldn't very well interview myself, so it kind of ended up being more of a reflection than an interview. In essence, I was very pleased with the support and participation I received from the school leaders that I chose to interview. Everyone was very accommodating. I was able to learn how technology plays a part in multiple aspects on our campus, some of which I did not know. I knew we used technology to manage those, but I was able to get some insight on how we use technology to manage those departments. I think that if I had to do all this over again, I might stick to just 3 questions. I kind of wish I would have done my ESL and my testing first, because that would have given me a little bit more insight into what questions needed to be asked, because I was putting myself on the spot. I noticed, well, it's really hard to answer that question because I just answered it. So I think I would stick with how they use technology, what areas of improvement are needed, and what would their department look like without technology. I think those 3 questions would have got me a lot more insightful information. I know, like I said, I know that a couple of my questions were repetitive in nature. I think I would also add a couple more departments to the list, or the required interviews that we were supposed to do. By this time next year, we will have a well-trained testing coordinator. So, if I were to do it all over again, I would be able to interview her instead of myself. All in all, I was pleased with the outcome of the assignment, and I am walking away with a wealth of knowledge. I feel like I understand more just on a broader aspect of how technology is used just to manage a school. Hopefully I will be able to use that information and knowledge one day when I am a school principal.